observation meeting. And so what I'd like you to do is take a look at this yellow sheet of paper. This lays out what we'll be doing during this post-observation meeting. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is take about 5 to 7 minutes to look over the notes that you took during your classroom observation. And complete the tool. Remember, we're focused on the two parts of the tool, which are the task and assisting learning. Remember that anything you check off on the tool, you're going to want to give specific evidence from the classroom observation to support why you check that off, okay? And then please create at least 1 or 2 noticings and wonderings related to Terry's focus question. So you want to select your most pertinent noticing and wondering. Not everything you notice, not everything you're wondering about, but the most pertinent ones related to Terry's focus question, which again is how are my follow-up questions deepening students' understanding of the text. After you create your noticing and wonderings, make sure that all of them are evidence-based and relate to the focus question. Also in your folder, I put in some examples of noticings and wonderings that are evidence-based. So you might be able to use those to sort of check off what you're saying to make sure that they're all evidence-based. After that time that you're given, that 5 to 7 minutes, then we'll go around the room. Everyone will share what they checked off on the teaching and learning feedback tool. Everyone will go around and share one thing that they noticed, and then everyone will go around and share one thing that they're wondering about. I'm going to chart all the wonderings, and then Terry will have an opportunity to respond to any of the feedback that she's gotten. Okay? Any questions? So let's take that time right now to fill out the tool and craft our noticings and wonderings. So we're going to get started. As I said before, what we'll do is first do a round robin where I'll invite everyone to share one checked indicator on the teaching and learning feedback tool, supported with evidence from your notes. And I will just mark down all of the indicators that have been said already. If you know, all of the indicators have been said and yours is the same as everyone else's, you can just do a pass so we don't have to repeat ones that have already been said. Then what we'll do is I'll go around the room and again invite everyone to share one thing that they noticed related to Terry's focus question. Same thing, if everything has been stated already, just say pass rather than repeating. Then we'll have one wondering related to the focus question. And I'll chart those wonderings so that when we're finished, Terry is able to respond to any of the ones that she wants to respond to. If she doesn't want to respond to any of them, she doesn't have to. That's also an opportunity for you to ask us any questions about anything that we said. Okay? Then I will also share the indicators on the teaching and learning feedback tool that have not been checked. All right. Any questions about that? Okay, so why don't we just go around the room. Annalise, will you start? Did I get your name right? I did, right? Okay.
We're beginning with
this tool. So just share one thing, one thing on this tool that you checked.
Under assisted learning, I checked can easily see, talk, and listen to each other during whole group discussion.
And give us your evidence.
That I noticed the majority of students felt very comfortable sharing their opinions when questions were asked.
Okay. Under the task, I checked covers information students already know and skills they can already do easily. My evidence for that was the discussion of the purpose of the author had for writing the article, and a lot of the students talked about giving information, providing information, and then also which led them into the discussion of persuasion.
Under the task, a check requires a revision of work or revisiting ideas and skills to take them deeper. And I noticed that the students were allowed to change their stance based on others' evidence. They were not locked into an original decision.
Okay, under task, I check requires responses to open-ended text-based questions. They read the text to give significant moments and their pros and cons, and they went back and looked at the text to give the evidence of why they said it was a pro or a con.
Larissa?
Did you say sense and concept? Oh, okay. I said that I checked under the task, requires students to make sense of concept, content, text language, other media or writing assignments, and the evidence was that the teacher helps students to make sense of space exploration, and also even at the beginning tried to help them see the difference between exploration and tourism.
Jolie?
Okay, I checked under assisting learning, see their language posted on wall charts. The teacher posted the responses, like cost too much, they wouldn't go, not enough information.
In the assisting learning, one of the checks I put was connect to prior knowledge, others' ideas, and there was quite a bit of that. With the unknown, what is unknown currently, what you see is unknown territory question, quite a bit of discussion on that from the students.
Okay. Christina?
Under assisting learning, see their language posted on wall charts. As the students shared the work they had done on the construction paper, Terry charted their responses, although in a shortened format, but they were still able to see their ideas represented on the chart.
Under task, requires responses to open-ended text-based questions. I had an opportunity to go around and speak with 5 of the students, and all of the students were able to give text evidence to show that they were doing what she had asked, and they provided me with an answer verbally. Like there was not enough information, and they cited specific sentences that just didn't give them enough information to want to go to space. Along with a person who said that they did want to go, and her response was seeing Earth from space is different in space than being here on Earth, because you don't get to see everything, and you would be able to have that opportunity. And so she did cite evidence from the text.
Okay. I checked our asked, assessing, or advancing questions to expand their understanding or elaborate on their ideas. And so I heard Terry ask a lot of assessing questions. What's exploration? What are unknown territories? Do you think that explorers were nervous or dangerous? What's the difference between a shuttle and a rocket? And we'll keep going around the room until all of the indicators have been checked. And just a reminder, if somebody already said it, you can just say pass, you know, if you don't have any new ones. Okay.
I have under assisted learning with the students, they worked in pairs and trios to try out thinking. There were, I noticed at least 2 or 3 pairs of students talking about their side, which pro or con that they chose.
Okay.
So it's a similar task if we're responding to open-ended text-based questions, but the example I noticed is students, you know, they're freely allowed to voice their opinions as long as they're able to back it up with evidence.
Okay. I'm sorry, was that one requires response to open-ended text-based questions?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, under assisting learning students, that check occurred on the purpose of the lesson. I think when she started off with the bell ringer, as far as the exploration, what she stated, the kids right off the bat knew the purpose of the lesson was going to be on previous text they had read. So they knew the purpose of the lesson, the expectations for them.
I checked under assisted learning to students listen and learn from each other,
published authors and the teacher, and as she worked on deepening their understanding, she often asked, what was the author's purpose question? And she consistently went back, and should a non-astronaut be allowed to travel, she referred back to the text, and so in that way looking at published authors.
And under the task, I checked requires responses to open-ended text-based questions. I'm sorry. The question, do you or do you not agree with space for travel? Why? Give evidence. And it was asked more than once.
That requires revision of work or revisiting ideas, but under task, I mean, there was just continuous demand for validating or elaborating on responses, you know, so we can just stick with the initial statement.
And I noticed I have the CPG here for this unit, and so I can attest that the task comes from the district curriculum, that this is indicated in, to be done in weeks 4 through 6, so it's in a different place than where it's suggested in the curriculum. But one of the things that the curriculum is suggesting is that they make a lot of connections from text to text, and clearly they've been reading the texts that go along with this. And they are following the part that describes identifying the author's purpose and backing things up with text evidence, and that's the main focus of what is in the curriculum.
Under assisted learning, are asking, assessing, and answering questions to expand their understanding or elaborate on their thinking. To go back to the author's purpose, the question that was asked by Terry was, can the author's purpose be more than one thing? And initially about 10 to 12 students said either yes or no, and she continued to probe and the students to connect and expand on what their answers were. And you had about 2 to 3 students who gave specific reasons, saying that it could be persuasive and it was informational. And students were going back and forth, and she called on several students who were able to give a little bit more.
And I had our invite to ask questions, get clarification or challenge ideas. I noticed there was at least one time where Terry said, well, you know, she says it's a con, who wants to say it's a pro, anyone have the other side to give to her. So we've gone around twice. Are there any that anyone has checked off that haven't been mentioned yet?
Well, the given wait time after a question, I mean, there was plenty of that. I don't think anyone's mentioned that.
Nobody's going to
I mean,
mention.
the pace was quick, you know, but I mean, there was ample wait time
Okay.
to respond.
And then the one I checked was fits with previous instruction under the task. That will follow because obviously they had already read both stories.
Okay.
And to add to that, appeared to know the purpose of the lesson. In the beginning, she was activating their knowledge about the story that had been previously read, and the students did seem, even the ones that were a little hesitant, you could hear as the conversations went along that they were able to join in and they understood what the purpose was.
And they read that focus question again that was printed in the textbook that focused their reading.
Anybody else has one that hasn't been checked off? Okay, I'm just going to quickly read the ones that were not checked off, okay? So we did not check requires students to only answer closed questions. We did not check have a reader-writer notebook. We did not check reflect on what they are learning along the way as they try out new techniques. And if you checked it, say it.
I
No.
checked that one.
Okay. Can you give us evidence of where you saw that?
I guess let's see. I mean, they were continuously reflecting on what was going on during the lesson, verbally reflecting on it.
Does anybody have a specific moment to?
Yes,
Yeah.
I checked that as well. At the end, after everyone had given their pro and their con, she asked them, is there anything that was stated that now requires you to change how you feel?
Oh, yeah.
And there was a student who said, I still think that it's stupid
Mm-hmm.
to go to space. if you know that something could happen to your body. So it did make that person reflect, and there was an ample opportunity for everyone else to do the same.
Okay. The last two that hadn't been checked are engage in self-evaluation and get feedback on what and how well they are learning.
I checked that, and I guess the way I noticed that was when Ms. Battle was monitoring around the room. You know, she saw a student had a particular question, or a student, she asked why did they, you know, getting that evidence out of them, that was their way of evaluating what they had written down and her giving feedback.
Okay. And then I'm pausing here because I'm wondering if that is more assessing or advancing questions rather than engage in self-evaluation. But I mean, there's not an answer to that. I was just pausing to think about that. And then the last one is revisit and revise their writing and or understanding of their reading. Did anybody check that? And we didn't.
I did that as well for reasons that I checked others, that she continuously was prompting them to rethink and elaborate on their initial responses.
And I would also say the one that we just came from, the engage in self-evaluation kind of feeds back into the one that I just mentioned. Because even after she said, I think it's stupid and I don't want to do it, she said, that's okay. And she gave her the feedback and confirmation to know that you don't have to change, that it is okay to stay where you are if you believe that and you have evidence to support it. So I think both of those kind of go together.
And I should have mentioned before we started this that any of the indicators that are not checked doesn't mean that they weren't there, it just means that we didn't see it. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to noticing and wonderings. Remember, they're going to be related to Terry's focus question.
I said that I noticed that the teacher restated the purpose of the lesson several times throughout the lesson, sometimes in a different way, using different verbiage, but always going back to what they were supposed to be focusing on.
I noticed at least 4 students were very vocal and said in their opinion about space tourism. And are we mentioning wonderings right now too? Or
No, we're going to keep that separate. Sometimes we do it where we do noticing and then wondering at the same time, but I think our first round we might keep that separate. Unless people are really used to that and want to do both at the same time. I'm going to leave that up to you. Thoughts?
No, that's fine with the notice.
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, we're focused on the follow-up questions, Terry's follow-up questions. Okay, go ahead.
And just my noticing of the students is that they are encouraged to voice how they feel when they think about a certain subject, and then of course are required to back that up with any text-based evidence. It's a very open answer and free to give their thoughts on the responses.
Were there any follow-up questions that Terry asked that specifically prompted that you had in your notes that specifically prompted that sort of experience for kids?
Going back to when they were voicing responses, she challenged them, trying to see if students agree, if anybody disagrees, why, and even when a student was giving a response, she gave a rebuttal, like, well, this is what I want to do, and to see if that would prompt a student to maybe change their stance or see if they want to stick with what they have.
Okay, perfect. So that's the kind of level we want to get to say, what specifically, what moment in the lesson or what moments in the lesson prompted kind of whatever statement we're saying.
Okay, I noticed that it became very personal with several of the students toward the end, and that they were starting to talk about in the pros and cons of, some about radiation, and they started knowing about sicknesses, and they talking about more personal, how it impacted them, and it got to get more engaged in their discussion, that they got to get more personal, where even Ms. Battle at one point said, with one student, I don't care. Well, she did care. And it did become personal, but she started elaborating on why. And that's where Ms. Battle probably prompted that. But more and more students were starting to get more personal, and how it affected them.
In terms of her follow-up questions, I think the fact that she asked why, but she also asked about the purpose of the text, is it to inform or persuade, and have the students respond to how the author used that. In terms of using those as follow-up questions, with every one like that one, she said why, and waited for a response from the kids.
Students understood that the author's purpose was persuasive, and she kept asking, well, what type of text is this? And she rephrased that several ways, so that, several different ways, so that kids could understand it. And what is the author trying to get me to do? Can the author's purpose be two things?
Let's see, with regards to the pro-con chart activity, I put, let's see, Ms. Battle, insisted on textual and opinionated, evidence, opinionated, let's see, elaborating on opinions and so forth. A lot of emphasis on elaborating and backing up what was said. That was my primary noticing.
So,
Oh, and the students complied with that. They did that.
one of the things that I had to work to understand in the lesson myself was, what is a significant moment? And by looking at Ms. Battle's example and what the students were actually producing, what I finally came to understand was that the significant moment was really a reason to be for or a reason to be against. And what that reason ought to be based from the text. That's what Terry wanted them to form an opinion based on the text. So when the sharing happened, I noticed that sometimes the reasons that they gave were based on the text, and then the text evidence was provided. Those were the two con examples. And then with the pro example that was shared, the pro example was, well, it's your life, you can do what you want. And that wasn't from the text at all. But of course, that was at the end of the lesson, and so there wasn't time to press on that to bring it back into the text to say where is a reason that we can be pro from the text. And so just to tag on a little quick I'm wondering about if there was any confusion around what a significant moment was and what the plan was for ideas that were inside of the text and outside of the text.
Well, with the significant moment, most of the time we've used significant moment with narrative text, and I'm finding that when I use it with persuasive and expository, they can't find the exact moment because it's just strict information. So when it's a conversation or something like that going on with the narrative, they can find it. If it's a point in the story, that an action taking place. But I do find that when I ask them for a specific moment, maybe I should say significant evidence, because I'm finding that when I talk about persuasive and that type of text, they're not getting the moment, because they're looking at the moment from a narrative aspect. What did this character do? Where did this happen? The setting, the place, the time. And it doesn't happen like that with expository. So that's why you sense that sense of confusion, because 90% of the time when we say significant moment, we're looking at a narrative with them.
So I had an idea about that, not to take us totally off of the noticings and wonderings, but I was wondering if you were actually looking for the author's arguments, significant, or find those, or reasons, whatever you want to call it, whether you say the reason or the reason for the author's opinion or the argument for the author's opinion. It would do two things. One is it might provide that clarity in terms of what you're looking for in a persuasive text. But the other thing I think it would do is it would start to use that language of argumentation in the classroom and get them used to that academic language.
Right.
Because I wondered that same thing, how significant moment was different than textual evidence. And if those in fact were
Yeah, and
the
a lot of
same
kids,
things.
when they would call me on the side, they'd say, it's the same thing as that. And I said, well, it is. I said, it is the same thing. I said, the difference is this is an actual moment, a part of this particular text, as opposed to your textual evidence. And that's the thing I noticed that a lot of them were getting confused with that. Maybe it was because I had 3 different things, and most of the time I have your opinion, text evidence. But this time I put significant moment, text evidence, and your opinion. So with all 3 of them there, that has made me realize, okay, they're looking at a moment from a narrative aspect. Now they're gonna look at it from the say, okay, what kind of text evidence do I have with this? to
So
back this
so
up?
tell me again how you see a significant moment different than textual evidence, because isn't textual evidence also drawn from the text? A
It is.
significant moment is
It's
drawn from the text.
It is. I think it's the perception that they have of the two. And what I mean by that is, with a narrative, they can pick out a significant moment very
Yeah.
quickly. Especially if you're giving them,
Right.
questions to prompt them. They can find the moment in the exact time and even maybe the statement that the character said. I'm finding that when they read this type of text, that it's hard for them to pinpoint. They understand what the author's thinking and how they're trying to persuade them, but what was the exact moment instead of the exact textual proof that I have? And then maybe it has something to do with the moment of the word moment other than proof or text evidence.
I think it
They're
might be
getting those two
moment. Yeah.
confused.
So we've suggested the term significant idea.
That's even
when
better.
we're in expository text, so we're not confusing this with narrative.
Because I'm finding that
Or
with narrative, they're
argument
definitely getting confused.
persuasive, yeah. And you could always take out the word significant and just say, what are the arguments, or what are the author's strongest arguments?
Use that
Or
word
something.
interchangeably, in the sense of just saying, you want them to understand it's a significant point, but it's the other word, moment, event,
Yes,
topic,
right.
whatever. That's gonna have to be
Yeah.
changed with that, because
Yeah.
I did notice that today especially, because that was the first time I ever put the two like that,
Yeah,
with text evidence and significant moment.
yeah.
And so that was the first time them seeing those two like that together in the same chart.
Yeah.
They've seen them both. but not in
Right,
the same
right,
chart.
right.
So I think
Okay.
that is something that definitely came to light today, was the fact that with those two, they couldn't get them together.
Yeah, which is good to know. I mean, really,
Well, that's what
good
it's all
to
about.
surface that, yeah.
And my noticing kind of ties in with what you all just said. My noticing was that a lot of the students, I know you just had the conversation about them with the significant moment and the wording, but a lot of them honed in my talking with them on the medical evidence. And several of them said there's not enough medical evidence, and they gave me a sentence and they said, how can I go to space if that's the only thing I know that's gonna happen is that I could get sick? What's gonna make me sick? How am I gonna respond to that? Another one said I could have a heart attack and my life could be cut short. So they did focus on that. I noticed that they did focus on the medical evidence and how that would be personal and impact them. So they may have been a little confused about the wording, but I do think that they were.
Yeah, they can find the text evidence.
That were important
Yeah.
enough for them.
They
Yeah,
can
the
definitely do that,
concept
but
of
I did notice that today because of the significant moment and the way that I've emphasized it so much with narrative text and characters and, setting and things like that, it just didn't tie into this as far as them making that connection. So that is something that I'm gonna have to bring up, and make sure that they understand the difference, and that if they see that, this is exactly what they're talking
Yeah.
about. This is not a difference.
And it might just be a matter of you showing some significant moments from a persuasive text that you
Right.
yourself have selected, and then what do we mean in persuasion when we
Exactly.
talk about something being significant? What do we mean
Right.
in narrative? How do those change?
I like that. What do we mean in persuasive?
Yeah, what is that? What is significance in persuasion? What is significance in narrative? What is significance in these different kinds? Okay, so my noticing, I was charting or like writing down a lot of your follow-up questions. So I wrote down at least 35 follow-up questions. I listed that at least 15 were directly related to the text space tourism, pro or con. The other 20 were follow-up questions that asked kids things like, that connected more to their lives and understand whether they understood the meaning of certain things like what is exploration, what are unknown territories. Okay. Other noticings that you have that that you want to get out there related to Tara's follow-up questions, other things that you think are important to get out there.
One noticing that I had since the focus question was about deepening the students' understanding is, I wrote the question down. Are there areas in the world that need to be explored, is the question that Terry asked. And I thought, what kind of response are we going to get? I was a little afraid in that moment because I didn't know where they were going to come. But one student said, the sea. And they were talking about the sea, and it was kind of like, you saw everybody like, oh, yeah. And so I did see kind of the mood change, and I really thought that was a good question. Well, I shouldn't give an opinion statement, but I thought that was a question that directly related to the follow-up question, the focus question, to cause them to deepen their understanding and to think beyond what had just been stated, which was what are our new territories? And there were several leading questions prior to that, but that directly seemed to get the deepening of the understanding started.
I noticed there was a nice mix, or there was a mix of yes/no questions as well as open-ended questions. And I think that seemed to help probe the kids. It helped to make them comfortable on one end, but it also helped to probe and deepen their understanding. So there was a mix of questions, not just the open-ended questions, but some yes/no questions sprinkled in to help the kids have a deeper understanding of the text.
I noticed one technique used to put an idea out into the class. You have an idea in your head and you want it to get out there. You do it through putting it in the frame of a rhetorical question. I'll give an example. Think about it. Didn't the early explorers have to think about this too? And so you pose it as a question. It's a rhetorical question, but it's meant just to put the idea out into the discussion. And by the way, that was the opportunity to make the connection to social studies that I think you had wanted to achieve as well and bring that into the mix.
Anybody else notice things that you want to get out there that haven't been said already?
I felt that when you asked them who doesn't have an opinion, that took your focus question even further, and it also validated those students. It allowed them to see that sometimes we can't make a concrete decision one way or the other, and it validated those students who were struggling with making a decision.
Anybody else? Okay, so let's go to wonderings, and what I'd like to do is I'm just go around the room again. I'm going to chart the wonderings, and then at the end, Terry, you respond to any of the ones that you want to respond to, if you want to respond, and then I'm charting them because then you can keep this as well, to frame, and, whatever you want to do with it. Okay.
Okay. I hope I stated this correctly. All right. I wonder if, while the students were doing their charting activity based upon the question, if the students were stating an opinion that they personally had on the chart, or if they were stating their stance on the issue, because when you charted, when the teacher charted on the board, I noticed that the opinion column was pro or con, and I wondered if the students were taking that side of it, or I felt that the students were giving you an opinion as in that costs too much.
And you mean by stance pro or con?
Exactly, right.
I actually had that same wondering that
Okay.
what was going in that.
You probably can phrase it better than
Yeah,
me.
no, but, right, so you're asking, let me see if I get this right. Were students actually supposed to say an opinion, or were they just supposed to say pro and con? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they could have numerous opinions, and then as they look at those opinions, then they could formulate maybe which side they were on.
Yeah.
I wonder what might happen if the teacher were to step out of the debate and let the students debate a little bit. If not, if there were more time, or possibly in the next lesson, with without the teacher facilitating that debate.
As I write these up here, feel free to say that's not exactly what I said, if that's not what you said.
What I'm wondering is when and how is feedback given to students who didn't have the opportunity to share, given the large class size and short time?
And what's gonna happen with that is their tickets out the door. I would go ahead and take a look at that and see what their basic understanding would be. Some of them might just give me a pro and a con. Some will go into a long, elaborate explanation of it. My point when I look at the ticket out the door, based on the question I asked them, I said, based on the text evidence, has your opinion changed or is it the same, and give me a reason why. So those who just have a pro or a con on their paper, what I will do with them is give them that ticket back on the door, give that ticket back and say, okay, give me text evidence. Those who gave me just text evidence and put pro or con, that's all I really need. I can't make them change their opinion about it or look another way. But the ones who just gave me a pro or con and no text evidence, because that was the whole point. I want to see the textual evidence as to why you feel the way this author does, or how did he persuade you to do that. So that's how I would give them feedback, basically, on their ticket out the door. Also, too, tomorrow, when they come in with the bell ringer, it's going to be that kind of situation. I'm going to elaborate on this simple fact of pro and con and the text evidence, and then go on to that. And also mention the fact of a significant moment now.
Hey, Tara, I'm going to put them all up and then you respond,
Okay.
rather than one by one. So
Okay,
then,
sorry.
yeah, that's okay, that's all right. Go ahead, Mr.
My wondering is what would have happened if they had read the text yesterday? I think
If what?
If they had read the text, the literature yesterday versus before the spring break, how much of an impact it would have made on the discussion with the student, because of the retention. It's been a week since they had read the text, and I know Ms. Ballard will go back and refresh them quite a bit as far as to get on the focus question on the text. So.
The final question was, based on the evidence, has your opinion changed? My wondering is how the close of the lesson will support or expand students' understanding or deeper understanding, expand their learning about the text.
Okay.
Okay, I think mine ended up 2 questions in one, so bear with me. If a dialogue between the students could have been built from the young woman's statement about not enough information, I'm wondering if a dialogue between students could have been built, and or could a probing question been devised that would have created counter argument so that the dialogue between the students would have occurred.
Let's see, I put for my wondering that maybe need a little bit more focus on the bell ringer question. You know, like the students didn't read their responses to the bell ringer question.
So sort of like what would happen if there was more focus on the bell
Yeah.
ringer question? It's going to be very colorful chart.
So I'm going to go back to the noticing that I had about how some of their significant moments / reasons were inside of the text and some were outside of the text. So my wondering is, how can students be led to differentiate between reasons presented in the text and their own reasons? In the follow-up instruction that happens, how will that be set up so that they have the opportunity to explore their own thinking on the issue using their own background knowledge, and then how can they clarify, so what format will that take?
So how can students differentiate between their own reasons and the author's reason? Okay. Okay.
You know, in about 15 minutes, this room's going to be filled with students.
Oh, better hurry up. Okay, Keisha.
The wondering that I had was in regards to the one student who raised her hand to say that she didn't have a stance. I had several wondering, so I'm gonna put them kind of succinctly. I was wondering what she actually wrote down when the assignment was given to go back and find evidence. Did she give evidence outside of the text, which just stated why she did not have a stance? Or did she give evidence inside of the text that gave both reasons that she agreed and disagreed with that led her to not have a stance? And what would be the next step was my wondering. Would she be required at some point to make a stand and either be pro or con? Or would it be allowable for her to just continue to say, I still do not care one way or another, or I still don't have enough evidence, or whatever the situation might be that led her to say she doesn't have a pro or con? So that was my wondering.
Okay. So mine are related to a couple of these, sort of about the dialogue one. So one of the things that I did notice is that a lot of the talk happened with you asking a question, students responding, you asking another question, students responding. That's where this wondering comes from. So I'm wondering if providing students with some think time or writing time after a question might deepen their responses. So my example is the question pertaining to what type of text it is. So when you ask what kind of text it is, we heard everything from descriptive to persuasive to expository. We didn't hear narrative. I was wondering if there was time, this kind of goes along with Mr. Sosa's, if they would have, if maybe giving them the time to reread that text, kind of look through it, come up with a response, give evidence as to why they think it's persuasive or expository or whatever, would have allowed them to give more thoughtful and precise responses rather than sort of guessing. And it might have also allowed you to see what kids are actually thinking what things. So how many, even though they all, there eventually was a class understanding of what kind it was, whether you would be able to get more information to assess what individual kids are thinking.
And I wonder how much your decision to dwell there or to move on had to do with your desire to get to a certain point in the lesson for the purpose of the observation. Had it been an ordinary teaching day, would you have chosen to stay in that moment a little longer?
Probably, and not only that, I would have known when to stop. When the kids were getting confused with the significant moment in the text evidence, I probably would have just ended it right there with them doing their chart and making sure that they understand the chart. I wouldn't have gone on to the other part. And it did have a lot to do with what I wanted to get in with the activity because of the observation, because I knew that closing that exit ticket was really going to help me find out who understood this and who didn't. As far as the debating part, with going back and forth with the kids with the debate, I'm finding that with this particular class, and believe me, they were on very good behavior.
I bet. That's what a lot of
With
adults
this
do.
particular class, you know, we try not to use the word debate too much in there. But anyway, the point is that most of the time they dialogue. It is with that. And I knew they didn't have a background with this. And so it was kind of like, I cut a lot of things short. If you notice, we didn't go through the whole reading of the story. I cut that short. With the video, I had another whole video showing them space tourism. I cut that short. So a lot of the things that I would have built up on definitely probably could have answered these questions. But the one thing I definitely do know is that, you know, the one with the student not having an opinion and making no stance, that's where that closing ticket would have given me the answer. When I closed the lesson, would I have support to expand about the statement more? Probably. As you can see, it was a very short passage, it was only 2 pages. So it really didn't give them a lot of info into, say, it's just space tourism. They didn't really get a lot on that. It's just about the money and the medicines and things like that. And that's what I was trying to get them with the probing questions. I do find that with a lot of kids in that class, it is going to be 4 or 5 who are going to be verbally saying what it is. But it's not those 4 or 5, I know what they're thinking. It's the ones that are looking at the paper to see what's going on in their thoughts. There was one student who was sitting right there in front of me, Luis, and he was filling out a significant moment. And I was asking him, well, how do you feel about this? I said, and I don't know if you noticed, but I gave him a plus or minus chart. And I said, how do you feel about this? And he said, I'm against it. I'm negative. I don't think it's the right thing. And that's when I kind of piggybacked on what I told them about, well, being negative doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's your opinion. So I was trying to get all that in there, but at the same time, believe me, I do understand what you're talking about. And the think time and the wait time and the right time, sometimes you can, I guess I know that class, and I know how many people we're going to write, and I know how many people we're going to verbalize. So the way I assess is basically that bell ringer and that ticket out the door. Yeah, I could have stepped out the debate a little bit more and been more of just a teacher facilitator, listening to them go about it. And that debate probably can happen later. I think, like Mrs. Sosa said, if we hadn't had that split, if we would have just read this story the day before or 3 days before, it would have been fresh in their mind.
And something that may help that debate is back in the curriculum, it talks about leading the students to evaluate the adequacy of the evidence that an author is providing. And so if they actually take them up, before we talk about what you think or what you feel, how well does the author support his own position with the evidence that is provided, and going through that then may lead them to say more.
Exactly. And like I said, looking at it from this viewpoint with a significant moment, the text evidence, what do you feel about it? That's a whole nother way I can take this lesson now. 3 different ways I can take that. What is your opinion based on the text evidence? What is your opinion without the text evidence? So I can do it with that. So there's a whole bunch of ways I can work this out.
Another way to do it too is even thinking about, what is your opinion based on the text evidence, and what more evidence would you need than that author has given you? Or like what else would you need to know to create a really firm opinion?
Exactly.
Because I agree with you that it's so short and there's only a little bit of evidence that author actually, either of the authors actually give for the text. Other wonderings that anybody had, yeah?
This, what you just brought up, brought about a wondering for me in that, I wonder if the students have been allowed to use the other text, slingshot around the moon, to base some of their evidence, because I was just noticing that, a lot of the things here with these professionals could have augmented some of their arguments about their lack of knowledge.
Right, and that's why I kept mentioning to them, I don't have all these degrees, I don't have all this, these letters behind my name, I spent 10 years in college. That's what I was trying to get at with that. And yeah, it did have a lot to do with shorter time, it has a lot to do with the background knowledge part, but there is so many ways that we can go with this now.
Yeah. But I agree. I was thinking that same thing during the lesson when you had kids focus on just the text that aligned with their opinion, whether they really wanted to look at both texts, because then they see the counter argument and then they can say, well, that person says, and it kind of gets them into that whole notion of counter argument. It might bolster their own opinion.
I noticed that one of the students used the cost, which is on the pro article, as a con. And so I thought that was
Right, so some kids went to that naturally. Right,
exactly.
Yeah. Any other wonderings? How much time do we have? You said we have.
In about 5 minutes, I'll start, 5 to 7 minutes, I'll
And
start
it's
pouring
going to
it.
take us a few minutes to get
Yeah.
Okay,
They'll start coming up the stairs in probably about 5 minutes.
Okay, so, so you guys can stop it here if you want, but there's a reflection in your folder. If you would fill out about that reflection, and I will take it from there.